So it sounds as though AMD's next generation of graphics cards, based on RDNA 4 architecture, will target the mid-range and not go up to the high end. Which is fine by me, it's the graphics card you can afford that you should care about, so for the vast majority of people, RDNA 4 should cater to their needs, and provided they're sold at competitive price points, then it all sounds good to me. This won't be the first time that AMD has tried this mid-range strategy. Let me talk you through a few times this has happened before and how it went. The GeForce 8800 cards were amazing. They were the first DirectX 10 cards, so aged very well, and ATI's challenger, the 2900 XT, came out later, consumed more power, and was slower. AMD then bought out ATI and focused on the 3000 series. These weren't intended to be faster than the 2000 series. They weren't even as fast as Nvidia's 8800 series was. But it didn't matter, for they were small, efficient, and most importantly, were priced very competitively. So competitively, in fact, that the slightly cut down Radeon 3850 was closer to the mid-range GeForce 8600's price, but performed so much better that it utterly destroyed them. So yeah, the Radeon 3000 series didn't have flagship performance, but were decent options at a low enough price point. And they paved the way for the Radeon 4000 series, which was awesome in every way. Even the 4000 series didn't beat the competition for performance, but they were still fast enough and were much cheaper to make and were priced low enough to make them the no-brainer option for gamers to buy. And that's what RDNA 4 needs if it wants to get AMD back in the running. It's the pricing that's really letting AMD down right now. They can be priced slightly less than Nvidia, but these days raw performance alone is not enough. And once you factor in Nvidia's superior ray tracing, upscaling, encoding, and other nice to haves, AMD pricing their competing products slightly cheaper than Nvidia's just isn't good enough. The other time AMD targeted the mid-range was with Polaris. Bear in mind, they were still looking to compete in the high-end with Vega, but those cards came out so ridiculously late that it looked as though AMD were only looking to compete in the mid-range. Polaris wasn't amazing. It was about as good and as efficient as Nvidia's previous generation 900 series of cards, and it was beaten again for performance and power efficiency the very next month by the GeForce 1060. But Polaris' saving grace was that it was priced cheaper, and it had a very competitive second tier of card in the form of the Radeon 470, which again was priced more closely to Nvidia's vastly inferior 1050 cards. This argument that AMD should be price competitive always gets upturned by someone pointing out that people will still buy Nvidia anyway. The best example of this being the GeForce 1050 Ti, which was vastly inferior to the Radeon 470 and 570, yet it sold much better. I'm kind of proud of this, but I have user benchmark to thank for this wonderful little demonstration comparing the two, where it favours the 1050 Ti by 600% somehow, thanks to insanely higher market share and more popular, even though it acknowledges that the 470 is by far the best value. And it's apparently cheaper now as well, but the point stands. The Radeon 470 was the best value, and yet people, and user benchmark, still consider the 1050 Ti to be much better value somehow, despite being demonstrably worse value. If people prefer a vastly inferior card, then I'd say that this is a marketing weakness by AMD, and that anybody tech savvy enough would have considered it a no-brainer to go for AMD's cards. But I like to think that since 2016, when these cards came out, that people have become more tech savvy, thanks to the boom in popularity of YouTubing tech channels. And so if AMD does make a superior product these days, they'll probably be rewarded with more sales than they used to be. So onto RDNA 4. I don't see it as a good thing they're dropping the high end, it simply shows they're unable to compete there, so why waste time and resources trying? And the whole idea that their cards will be smaller and cheaper and more efficient just because they're only targeting the mid-range doesn't really make sense when you consider that cards like the Radeon 6700 XT and 7800 XT are already kind of like this. They're not cut-down versions of a high-end card, they are their own smaller die. So we should probably be expecting something along those lines again, sans a bigger, high-end card above them. It didn't even dawn on me when making this video, but you probably clicked this video expecting me to speculate about how fast these cards will be. I don't know. And I'm not just going to tell you I've heard sources saying this or that, because they probably don't know either. But I'd like to see a Radeon 7600 performance card at a sub $200 price. And I don't think it's that much of an ask, when that card is currently at $250. Meanwhile, at the top end of the stack, I'm going to be bullish and will predict the same performance as from this generation's flagship 7900 XT. Because okay, AMD might not be aiming for the high end with RDNA 4, but it seems regressive to not at least aim for the same performance that they were capable of 2 years prior. If they achieve previous gen flagship performance, then it will be very much like their Radeon 3000 series all over again. And just like with that generation, it will all come down to how price competitive AMD are. because the world isn't screaming out for faster cards at higher price points. It's demanding performance levels that already exist, but at prices that people can actually afford. It's amazing how, for the last few generations, prices have resisted dropping. Every new product seems to appear above the existing ones in the pricing stack. People seem to justify why it's the case every time, and I think it's long due a big pricing collapse. It's happened a bit, but I want more, and I think we're going to get it with the added strain of a new wave of cards from Nvidia, AMD, and maybe Intel as well. So the budget market is currently dominated by Radeon 6600s, which people have been tricked into thinking are good. But when you think about it, they're almost 2 generations out of date. They're less power efficient than the latest generation, they have outdated feature sets, and if I'm honest, are selling now for the price they should have been when they were new almost 2 generations ago. It's a sad state of affairs when people are still getting excited about a 600 tier of graphics card from 3 years ago. Though of course I'd still recommend the Radeon 6600 to anybody who had to buy a budget gaming rig today, but I can't get too excited about it for the reasons I've mentioned. So we need new budget cards with the latest feature set, ray tracing performance that's competitive with similar competing products, and enough general performance to keep up with this generation of consoles at acceptable resolutions. I don't think this is an unreasonable ask. We've just not had it for the last few generations, and I'm pleased to see that reviewers are holding the same sentiment towards this by remembering a time when things were different, and judging existing cards accordingly. So if we can get a good all-rounder for an affordable price, then RDNA 4 will be good news for everyone. AMD can achieve all of this, but I do fear they're going to shoot themselves in the foot with their pricing, as has been the trend recently. I would like them to stop offering an inferior product to Nvidia at a slightly cut down price, because that's not good enough anymore. AMD has found a way to shoot themselves in the foot across their entire product stack. They need to stop this silly upselling nonsense where they price their second best cards like their 7700 and 7900 XTs too close to their bigger brothers. And as a result, people end up buying neither of them and just go for Nvidia instead. AMD needs a new Radeon 3850 or 470, being a card that's good enough on its own, but if you want slightly better, then there's its bigger brother to go for instead. Right now, those second tier products are getting bad reviews, and then inevitably get their prices cut soon after because no one's buying it. But the bad press remains. So AMD, with RDNA 4, please give us decent mid-range cards at a series of affordable price points. Just make PC gaming affordable again.